And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday early afternoon here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So yesterday marked 25 years since the release of what I would consider to be a sort of second-tier favorite in my all-time favorites movies list. This film wouldn't make the top 25. I don't even know if it would make a top 50. It might be close. Very difficult to make those kinds of lists when you're a cineast such as myself, who at a certain point in life was just watching one great movie after another. But this is a film that I absolutely, and yeah, it's fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It's in the low 70s, but I feel like somehow this still feels underrated by history because I don't know anybody who has seen this movie that doesn't say, oh my God, I love that film. It has a peculiar magic. It is one of the, in theory, most convoluted plots. There are genres being mixed that you shouldn't go together. This would be like, oh, I would like to mix vodka and gin and make a martini like that. And a bartender says, do that. Well, if you put the ingredients there as fuck can. There are elements in this film, not mesh, but there is alchemy. The filmmaker, Gregory Hoblet, got the right cast at the right time and just weaved movie magic and was able to establish a rapport and chemistry and a real feeling of love and a bond between two actors playing father and son in the film. Maybe they worked one day together. You know, you calculate how this film would have been shot, and the two principals in this movie, Frank Sullivan in the late 1960s and his son, John Francis Sullivan, in the late 1990s. Well, how could they ever be in the same physical space if they're 30 years apart? And what do you mean bonding? How could they be? Well, that's the substance of drama, and that is the 2000 very early summer release, Frequency. Now, I've talked about on the channel how I am a Dennis Quaid fan as an actor. I've seen a lot of his best films. I've always felt he's maybe a little bit undersold. He's had Oscar buzz a number of times, but never got a nomination. In 2002, there was talk he was going to get a nomination as a supporting actor for Far From Heaven, playing Julianne Moore's wife in the Todd Haynes film. And he also was in The Rookie, the Disney movie, really a great baseball film where he plays the real-life left-handed pitcher, Jimmy Morris, who, I mean, it's a cliche, but the guy came out of nowhere, all of a sudden throwing 98 miles an hour and made the major leagues when he was in his mid-30s. It was a crazy true story. That was a really good movie. But Frequency, Quaid is perfectly cast, and Jim Caviezel, 3-4 years before Passion of the Christ, is also perfectly cast. They don't necessarily look anything alike. Jim Caviezel, very interesting face. Dennis Quaid, what you would call a conventional leading man looking guy, very attractive man from when he was a kid. They used to say about Dennis Quaid, he is a character actor stuck by the fact that he looks too much like a leading man to really be a character actor. But, he had a great career as a leading man nevertheless in some really amazing films such as Inner Space, Suspect, The Big Easy, and lesser works which I still enjoy such as Great Balls of Fire, Everybody's All-American, even DOA with Meg Ryan, his future bride. But Frequency is a true unicorn of a movie because, generally speaking, when you have a film that is very heavy on sci-fi, that has very serious science fiction elements that probably can't exist in the natural world, at least the way that us non-science people understand it. Usually, that's how you would describe the movie. It's a science fiction film. And in the world of the movie Frequency, this isn't much of a spoiler. The first 30 seconds of the trailer gives this away. In the world of the movie Frequency, there are two distinct time periods, not exactly timelines, that would be the wrong word, but there are two time periods in which this film is set. It is set in 1969, the 1969 of Queens, New York. A very sad and depressing time for a lifelong Yankee fan such as myself, and I wasn't alive in 1969, but 1969 was the year of the amazing Mets. The New York Metropolitans, who had taken the city, from a baseball perspective, had taken the city from the New York Yankees, who from 1923 through 1962 won half of the World Series. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Yankees had won half of the World Series. And then the Yankees kind of collapsed as the 60s unfolded. Mantle got old. Well, he wasn't really that old. His body got old would be more accurate. Mantle got old. And the next generation of great Yankees like Tom Tresh, they weren't so great. Team went downhill. And the Mets drafted well, even though they had a chance to get Reginald Martinez Jackson, who became very famous as a New York Yankee, even more so than his days in Oakland. But the Mets drafted guys like Tom Seaver. And before you knew it, they were contenders. And in 1969, the Miracle Mets, it wasn't that much of a miracle. They won 100 games. They were a great baseball team. And Tom Seaver was a lifelong end boss of a pitcher. He was better than Nolan Ryan. That's a hill I'll go down on. Better than Catfish Hunter. He was better than Jim Palmer. Tom Seaver, top 10 greatest starting pitchers ever. Guy was a fucking monster out there. But in the world of the movie Frequency, just before the 1969 World Series is set to go off, we learn that a firefighter named Frank Sullivan, he has a wife played by Elizabeth Mitchell, really good performance. She has to play 2 time periods, and she's really great in this film. And he has a son, Junior, John Francis Sullivan. Well, no, not Junior. Johnny. His father calls him Little Chief. This is a recurring thing. His nickname for his kid is Little Chief. Frank Sullivan always calls his son Little Chief. And he's a firefighter, a great firefighter. And this is what we get as the Miracle Mets are getting ready to play in the World Series. And then we fast forward 30 years. We don't really fast forward. It's as if these two stories are going on at the same time at this point in the film. 1999 is here, 1969 is here. But we learn that Frank Sullivan dies in a fire just before the World Series. Pretty sure it was the day before, 2 days before, but just before the World Series, dies in a fire. And this has, unfortunately, informed his son's life. His son is now probably around 40. He has difficulties in his personal life. He ended up a police officer, and there's a little bit of a running gag of the cops versus the firemen and all of this sort of stuff you even see now. But his son ended up a cop, and that's Jim Caviezel's character. And, excuse me, I guess I'm still not 100%. I apologize for coughing. Wow. I hadn't coughed all day. I had to turn this thing on, and suddenly I was going to start coughing. Anyway, the son is struggling in his personal life. He was apparently very serious relationship, and it looks like the girl is breaking up with him because he just can't emote properly. It seems really unfortunate, but he didn't get to have the childhood that he should have because his father died in a fire 30 years prior. And, I mean, Dennis Quaid's character is full of life. I guess he's also supposed to be around 40 in the late 1960s, give or take. He is a heavy smoker, but you die in a fire, it really doesn't matter that he was a heavy smoker. It's a sort of a side issue, the fact that the guy smokes and the son doesn't smoke. So in 1999, John Sullivan, the son, is going through some of his father's stuff with a childhood friend named Gordo, played by Noah Emmerich. He was in Truman Show, and he was really good in the movie Miracle with Kurt Russell. He played Craig Patrick, the assistant coach in that film, for reference. Speaking of Disney sports movies, I mentioned Dennis Quaid in The Rookie. The next big sports movie they made after The Rookie was Miracle. So they're going through some of his father's stuff, and the Noah Emmerich character is really trying to be helpful. He doesn't like the fact that his lifelong best friend he's struggling with stuff he had nothing to do with, and he can't do anything about. There's nothing you can do. And he doesn't want to say, let it go, stop obsessing over the fact that your dad was taken away so early. It's really sad. So they start monkeying around with some of his father's old stuff, and they see this big device. I had no idea watching this movie. I should point out, my sister and I saw this film on its opening day. The New York papers raved about it, and I believe the New York Daily News gave it 4 stars and talked about how they hoped that Dennis would actually get an Oscar nomination, that's how good. They said he's always been under the radar to some extent, but underrated, and this is his best performance that he's ever given in a movie. He gets to flash the smile, all that sort of stuff. So they see his father, this huge device that he had called a ham radio, and it was a way for people to communicate pretty much around the world. But the people who had them and had licenses were very, very serious about it. And if you had somebody that you didn't recognize, well, where is this from? Identify yourself, call signal, you might report them. It seems absurd. So they have this thing, and the 2 guys are joking about the fact that, oh, your dad, he never wanted us to mess around with this, and we always tried to play with it, but he always says, no, son, this is serious, this is serious. So they set the thing up. And on a random night, I think just before the World Series, also just before the start of the '69 World Series, John Francis Sullivan in 1999 sets the thing up, turns it on, and he starts chatting with a guy who also appears to be from Queens, and they start chatting back and forth, and we realize that he is talking to his father. There's an aurora borealis going on. There's sunspot activity, and somehow, and this is the science fiction stuff, somehow the sunspots have fucked with the space-time continuum. And a kid who is 40, or however old he is now talking to his same-aged father. The father is in 1969. They're sitting in the same spot, in the same house, talking to one another. Now, I didn't actually know that was the premise to this film. When my sister and I sat down, we went to the Broadway Mall in Hicksville to see this movie. Not that nothing ever got spoiled, because the previous year, The Sixth Sense, there were so many angry people because that movie got spoiled for so many. I went into Frequency, and I feel like the only trailer that I had seen didn't exactly give it away. And if you look at the original posters, the posters you see now have the faces of both of the guys, but the original posters did not have that. Didn't have their faces. Their faces were kind of wisps, almost in some sort of mist or something. They didn't want to advertise the film with the 2 guys because Dennis's star had kind of fallen. He'd had some personal problems. They wanted to sell it on the fact that this was actually a terrific film, on its own merits. We don't need any kind of names above the titles or whatever. So that's the science fiction. The thing that can't happen is that the guys are not in the same physical space. They are in a different time, and they're communicating over the radio. So, needless to say, Dad, you're about to die in a fire like tomorrow. Don't do what your instinct tells you to do. You're going to follow your instincts in that fire, and you're going to die. Don't follow your instincts. Do the opposite of what your instincts tell you. And as he's saying that to him, his old man he's not 100% sure that who he's talking to is legit. He thinks it's some kind of a sick, disgusting prank, and he's making threats. But there's something about the way the person that the elder Sullivan is talking to is so sincere. There's a little voice in his head that's saying, "The son of a bitch might be, this is too weird. Something might be right." Now, there would be no movie if Frank Sullivan simply died in the fire again. He does not. And the movie then spins into a different direction. So it's like the science fiction elements are there. We're still seeing it throughout the film. But this movie also is a serial killer film. It's a story about fathers and sons and baseball. And cliche though this may be, there is something to that. I can attest to it. My own father and I, may he rest in peace, bonding over so many Yankee games, bonding over him coaching Little League, and me getting to play in Little League, play in a couple of, not really big games. I wasn't in the Little League World Series or anything like that, but getting to play baseball in front of a crowd, getting to strike out, hit home runs, make good fielding plays at first base. turn an unassisted triple play when I was 9 because I was the only one who knew the rules. That, well, the guy on second wandered off and I just caught the ball. I'm going to run over there and step on second, and I'm going to run back and step on first, or whatever the case might be. The beauty of baseball, the beauty of family, and the idea of sometimes you can change the past. Well, in the world where science fiction like this exists, you can change the past. And it's not a time travel story. So like, you can call this a time travel story, but it's really not. It's more of a time bending story, or being able to make changes without traveling through time, but simply because you're communicating with somebody who is 30 years behind you. It's just completely insane. And all of these elements, the young man trying to come to terms with the fact that his father is gone, and maybe his father isn't gone. There's at least 7 or 8 distinctive genres. There's the mystery element, because I wonder who is a serial killer. And what if, and this is where you get into the sort of butterfly effect aspect, what if the serial killer, because there is no serial killer in the original timeline. That's one of the crazy twists in this movie. The circumstances when they change history so that John Sullivan does not die. I keep saying John Sullivan, Frank. When Dennis's character doesn't die, it creates a serial killer narrative. And man, it's just amazing. And the thing is, there are certain films where, for example, the baseball angle would just be, for people like me who like baseball. But they're able to tie the specifics of the 1969 World Series into the narrative. The character played by the late, unfortunately recently passed, Andre Braugher. He was the best friend of Dennis's character before he passed. And then he is very close with the son, because he's a cop on the police force. And mild spoiler, there is a moment in the movie where the police actually think that Dennis Quaid's character, this to me was a little bit of a stretch, but you go with it because you understand where they're coming from. We obviously know he didn't do it. We're watching the film. But he thinks that somehow he's involved in these killings. It doesn't really make any sense that a guy, an upstanding model citizen with a wife and a kid who adores him, is just going to randomly start murdering people. I mean, it's more than a little bit of a stretch. It's basically a zero, but you go with it. And the moment in the movie, I'll have to spoil this, where Dennis Quaid tries to explain, the name of the character is Satch, that Andre Braugher plays. He's trying to explain to him, listen, I know that what I'm saying to you is fucking bonkers. I know this. Believe me, I know what I'm telling you is fucking stupid, but this is what happened. Now, what inning are we in the game? They actually have a conversation about the game. He says there's going to come a point, not long from where you just said the game is, where a guy on the Mets named Cleon Jones, he's going to get hit in the foot, and the ump isn't going to see it, and the ump is going to say, no, the ball didn't hit you, and Cleon is going to say, it hit my foot, and you check the baseball, and there's going to be shoe polish on that baseball because that ball hit my foot. And that moment in history, which really happened in the 1969 World Series, plays out behind us. And the look on Andre Braugher's face when he realizes that something completely idiotic, impossible, has just happened. Dennis Quaid told him something that cannot be. This can't be, yet here we are. And I remember when we saw that in theaters, it's a tense moment in the movie, but the look on Andre Braugher's face is so priceless, you can't help but start cracking up. The entire audience was like the biggest laugh in the film, even though we're still at a moment of high tension. So it is really a very emotional movie. And you kind of start to play it out in your head. And there's a little bit of the Back to the Future, a little bit of the sadness of, the kind of runouts that we don't get to see. So for example, in Back to the Future, Marty McFly spends most of the movie with 1955 Doc Brown. 1985 Marty McFly and 1955 Doc Brown become the best of friends by necessity, by necessity. But at a certain point, Marty's got to go back to the future, and, well, is his family going to be completely different? And is the Doc Brown that he returns to, is he even going to be alive? And is this the same Doc Brown? Is it going to be the same guy that I just spent the last week trying to get back to the future with, and all of this sort of stuff? Well, in a world of frequency, you ask yourself, well, Dennis Quaid's character didn't die in the fire. He's a heavy smoker. Maybe he dies of lung cancer. Maybe there's no way to get him to exist in 1999. And what happens if we don't actually catch the serial killer in 1969? Well, then what? He's not that old. He could theoretically still be around in 1999, and the story just goes in all kinds of different directions. And it just somehow all works. The magic, this sort of conviction of Caviezel's performance, and as an actor, he kind of go both ways. I've always been a little bit hot and cold on that guy. I know he was apparently fantastic on the TV show Person of Interest. A lot of people love that. I know people are huge fans of that show. Didn't like the movie he did with J-Lo called Angel Eyes. And, excuse me. Thin Red Line, his performance is perfect because his character, he has the eyes. It's not really supposed to be a very broad performance. Malick wasn't really going for that. At Passion of the Christ, what a brutal movie. It is so depressing. I'm not going to take anything away from his performance there. Or Mel's direction, whatever. I can't ever watch that movie again. I'm sorry. It was beyond horrendous, and I know that was the point, but still. I like what he does in Count of Monte Cristo. I thought he was good. I thought he was really good, actually. And Guy Pearce, it kind of flipped it. You would have maybe thought that they would have cast it in the opposite way. But his performance in this film is just marvelous, and because he's a completely different kind of actor to Dennis Quaid, but somehow they are able to build this amazing chemistry despite spending all of their time on a fucking radio. And yeah, we see both of them, but they're not together. Somehow we feel it. We feel this deep, unshakable, unbreakable bond between father and son. And it's so corny, and in theory, it should be manipulative. We should be saying, give me a fucking break. But it is so well done. Again, the performance by Elizabeth Mitchell, she's just amazing in both in 1969 and 1999. And, you start wondering to yourself, is there any way that the son and the father are going to exist in the same, in the current day? Can this even happen? I'm not going to give you any more spoilers. And before I forget, Frequency is available to stream. I think it's on the Tubi app, but I know it was on Plex. But it is available, I believe, on Tubi, which is a free app, as is Plex. And Tubi have to deal with some commercials, but it's not horrendous the way Pluto is, where it's like 10 minutes of commercials for every 10 minutes. We're just fucking stupid. They ought to have some sort of a subscription tier for $1 where you don't have to, a 90-minute movie as a 3-hour time slot. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But this is one of those films that I can revisit a couple of times a year. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see there are a number of movie reactors, such as Popcorn in Bed, who had really not known, maybe they had heard of the movie, they're not really sure. One of them I think there was a TV show a couple of years ago, which was kind of a spin-off. But this is a movie that takes people by surprise. The less you know about it, in general, the less you know about it, the better, because most of the movie reactors I have seen did not know that this was a science fiction film. They thought it was a story about, a father and a son. Is there a time travel element? Maybe that's science fiction. But nothing in this film develops the way that you expect it to. It's just one surprise after another. And in a kind of cynical world, there is something to be said for a good old-fashioned heart-tugger. And a film like this, which I believe earns the lump in the throat and earns its tears towards the end, because plenty of people are bawling their eyes out when the film comes to a close. And there's a few laughs where there's a character in 1999 talking to a character in 1969 and kind of giving him the secret to the universe. He just basically gives him the word. He just says, just remember the word Yahoo. And then obviously when the first time, presumably this young man, this kid, hears Yahoo sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, he invests every cent, and he's probably going to be worth a couple of $100 million by the year 1999. So there's a lot of kind of topical humor and a lot of laughs. And, really good performances, as I said, up and down the line. Andre Braugher had such an authenticity. Whether it's the 1969 or 1999, his performance is great, never misses a beat. And I guess Jim Caviezel's character of Johnny, Little Chief, I guess he's the lead, but they give Dennis just about as much screen time as him. I haven't done a comparison. Like, I don't know which of the actors has the most actual time on screen. But to me, it feels like Dennis's movie because his character is so critical to the son. Not that vice versa, but it just feels like, even from a symbolic perspective, that Frank Sullivan is the most important character in the film. And as much as I don't like the New York Mets, I used to vociferously root against the New York Mets. Met fans suffering was my nirvana. 1986 World Series, I've never gotten over it. Never gotten over it. The only Yankee fan left in the fucking junior high school. Every other Yankee fan, they became banned. Whoa, I root for the Mets now. Unacceptable. You go down with the ship. You know, I went down with the ship. The Yankees of 1986, not that great. Mets, of course, had one of the great teams ever. But Frequency, I can't believe it's 25 years old. It was released April 28th of the year 2000. Unbelievable. Directed by Gregory Hoblit and starring Dennis Quaid, Jim Caviezel, Elizabeth Mitchell, and Andre Braugher. This has been episode 501 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Tuesday afternoon here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.